Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors, LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Bruckman. I'm extremely excited to have Mike Finger join us today. Mike is going to be our first guest that is going to give us some insight into the world of small and medium-sized businesses, the buying and selling and transacting of those. We haven't had this conversation yet. It's long overdue. Mike, how are you?
Excellent, Brandon. Appreciate the invite. Looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So maybe let's start here. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience, sort of what you're working on now, and maybe give them a little background of how you kind of got to this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Been lucky enough to own 8 small businesses in my career. I've sold 4, I failed twice, and I still own 2. Started my first business in the mid-90s, cut my dining room table in half, and my wife and I made 2 desks and started serving our customers out of our living room. Grew that business, found I was a bit of a growth junkie, started a second business. I'm 10 years in, 50 full-time employees, and I am completely toasted. I'm ready to do something else, and that's when I had my first moment of, what do you mean I can't sell my business? Long story short, 5 years later, I've made enough changes in the business to be able to sell it successfully. It was a life changer for me. It was truly a do-over, right? Got to explore to see where I wanted to spend my time. Spent a year working as a business broker, helping others buy and sell small businesses. Loved part of that, hated part of that. Went from there to run an incubator, helping startup and growth companies start up and grow faster. Did that for about 3 years. Missed being an owner. Went back, bought and sold 2 small businesses as turnarounds. And then landed in the space where I am now, where I coach small business owners who are interested in preparing their business for sale. I'm not a broker anymore. I don't do the buy and sell. What I do is help them create a business that they can own forever or sell tomorrow. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's awesome. There's so much to dive into. Let's start with, and the name of your company that you founded is Exit Oasis. And I love the name for that. And then the tagline that I'm seeing on your LinkedIn, this is how we met. So Mike and I sort of met each other, quote unquote, on LinkedIn. I kept seeing Mike's content, which is absolutely amazing and educational, entertaining. I don't know. I want to ask this question. All right. Where do the memes come from? Where do the pictures come from? Is your mind just kind of rolling there in Western Wisconsin? And these are the kind of the ideas that come up with. Where's the inspiration for some of these pictures? They're amazing.
You know, it's really funny. I've been on this LinkedIn journey for 5 or 10 years now. And at the beginning, it was really hard, right? You know, you'd sit down to try to do something and just pound your head against the wall. But over time, it got to the point where I actually enjoy doing it. So it's the step out of the shower and text myself a message about an idea. But I have the luxury of my content coming from real life. The stories I tell are real stories, obviously with certain things changed to protect the innocent. But it's It is it's the Wild West out there in small business ownership.
Yeah, it is. And those seem to be the most engaging stories. Is when we do tell that story that is real, that folks are experiencing, that they may be scared to ask about. Is that what you find from most of? How would you characterize most small business owners as they're sort of reaching that point of, hey, maybe I'm burned out like you were, maybe I want to sell. Where are they at in that sort of process? It feels like they're pulling up from their business and going, oh, I'm ready now, like ready to sell. Who's ready to buy? How is that not helpful for them? How should they do these?
Such a great question, Brandon, because I mean, we're going to whitewash here, right? You know, everyone's a little different, but I would say that if you wanted to characterize how most small businesses view this topic, I would say they wait and then they fail. Most small businesses don't sell. Let's start there. The best numbers available say less than 20% of small businesses will ever transact successfully.
Wow.
I think the number is way lower than 20%, but way lower is still less than 20%, and that's the number everyone uses. Okay, so we're starting from that premise. Most owners are operating under the belief that they can sell their business when they decide they, as the owner, are ready to. And the biggest problem with that belief is that your ability to sell your business has almost nothing to do with your willingness to do it, and almost everything to do with whether or not your business is ready for sale. And I suspect we're going to talk about it when we talk about how your audience might be viewing the potential of purchasing a small business. And part of the reason I share this is to help them understand, what does the herd look like, right? What does this market that they're glancing into look like? And the unfortunate truth is it looks like a whole bunch of unsellable businesses, and then a few owners starting to wake up to the reality that they may want to exit someday, and they're far from being able to do so.
Interesting. What makes a business unsellable?
I focus on three basic questions when I'm working with an owner, and you can take those questions and just kind of tweak them to make them a buyer's questions. Those questions are my results desirable? Am I making money? Am I producing financial results that will allow a buyer to look at the business and go, hey, I got to get me some of that, right? This is very basic. I take a very simple approach to this stuff. So from a buyer's perspective, the tweak on that is, are the results desirable? Is there something here to buy? Second question is, can a buyer duplicate your results? Right? Is the business completely dependent on me as an owner, and yet somehow I still believe I can just transfer ownership to someone else? If I am the value in the business, there is no value to sell. Last but not least, can you document your results? So that's my 3D perspective on selling a business. Are your results desirable? Can a buyer duplicate them? Can you document them? What makes them unsellable? If you answer no to one or more of those questions.
It seems pretty simple to make it sellable, but I'll relate this back to some of our clients in real estate, and not to shame anyone.
Yeah.
But when we go through the topic number one, are your results desirable? The premise of what I think I'm making and the reality of what I'm actually making in terms of profitability is often different. When we kind of dig through that, do you find the same thing here, where a business owner so engulfed in the business is like, well, yeah, I think I'm producing these kind of margins, but then you dig through results and you're not getting there? Is that a
Oh yeah, that
in terms of a theme?
It's so funny. And the reason it's easy for me to laugh at them is because I am very much from the them group, right? I've made these mistakes. I've said these things like, we made a lot of money this year, but we put it all back into the business.
Ooh.
You know what that means? That means you didn't make any money this year. What you were calling profits are actually expenses, right? Profits survive the end of the year and your best intentions, and they show up on your tax returns.
Mm-hmm.
That's the journey that many of us are. And again, it's our own fault as owners. The direction I give to my accountant is what? Minimize my taxes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, now you go, I want to sell my business, and I, as a buyer, look at your tax returns, and what do I see? Zeros.
Yeah.
Negative. If you haven't made any money, how am I, as the buyer, going to use the profit track record of the business to get a loan and pay you what you want for the business? Most of us don't realize, as sellers, as owners, that our business buys itself, that almost every buyer will use the financial results of the business to cash flow the purchase of that business.
It's where we started when we looked at a few small businesses. We the financials and what's in there.
Yep.
Talk about that's maybe shift between seller and buyer. So talk about maybe the buyer's perspective, potential buyer's perspective, as they're looking at that. There's some terminology we can do here to take out some of the accounting, say creativity.
Yep.
Always legal creativity, of course, but creativity. Talk about maybe seller discretionary earnings. How should buyers sort of look at this puzzle? Because it seems a bit muddled for them to see it, because we could have underneath those layers, there could be a profitable business there.
Absolutely. And for me, the beauty of the term seller's discretionary earnings is that it means what the words actually say. These are the earnings in the business that an owner has discretion over how they spend. They're funds over and above the real monies needed to operate that business. So what falls into it? Well, certain easy things, right? Net profit, that's in seller's discretionary earnings. What I pay myself as the owner, that's in seller's discretionary earnings, right? Things like interest, depreciation, some of those add backs we use to get to EBITDA, that's in seller's discretionary earnings. That's the science part of that. The art part of that is where it gets a little screwy, right? Now, these are real life examples, right? I look at a set of financials and I see a $25,000 annual expense where the owner takes his family to Florida for 2 weeks every year. Okay. Is that an add back to seller's discretionary earnings or not? Well, if he goes down there, spends an hour at the conference and the rest of that 2 weeks at Disney World, that's an add back.
Yeah.
If he goes down there and while the family's on the beach, he's making 40% of his sales for the year at the conference, that's not an add back, right? So we start to get into that nuanced space. And that's where, from a buyer's perspective, where experience and time spent in this exercise becomes so valuable. Because you deal with an experienced buyer and they can sniff a set of financials and know if there's good stuff there, right? They just glance through it and they're like, yeah, this is worth putting through the analysis. Others will look at it and go, no, thank you, quick pass, right? So you've got folks that are thinking about buying a small business. What I tell buyers is you need to fall in love with the search. You need to fall in love with the process of looking, because I don't know if you're going to have to look at 10 or 100 businesses to find one that's worth your buying. But each of those experiences is going to educate your ability to see what's actually there.
Oh, I love it. So we'll go back and forth. What can sellers do then to help buyers? How are you advising them to maybe unlock that puzzle a little bit around, let's say, seller discretionary earnings, and be transparent about what's in there? Because we are playing at the same time, we're sort of playing a little bit of games on valuation and figuring out price, but where's that sweet spot where sellers can disclose the right amount of information to attract the right buyers?
The sweet spot is if you can't prove it, it didn't happen. Brandon, I have had this experience many times, but I'll tell you just one of them. I'm looking at a complex that's a combination laundromat, car wash, storage facility, right? Lots of stuff going on in this place. And He's asking a certain amount for it, and the taxes just aren't getting me there. So I meet with the seller and the broker, and going back and forth asking questions. That meeting comes to an end. The seller leans over and says, "Why don't you come back to my condo and I'll show you the real numbers?"
Ooh.
And sure enough, I go back there, and he has his second set of books.
Wow.
Right now, I mean, literally his second set of books. Go through that conversation,
Yeah.
and we get to the end of that conversation, and he literally says this to me, Brandon. He says, "And the good news is, I think there's actually more profit here than we're showing, because I think my brother is stealing from us." All right, so that's the
I
spectrum.
choke on my coffee.
If you're a buyer going through that journey, you're going to draw the line somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I think any experienced buyer has learned that the only place you can legitimately draw the line is at what the tax returns say.
Yeah.
Because anything beyond that is you taking a flyer and writing a check based on this. Keep this in mind. This is what a seller in that situation is saying. They're saying, "Brandon, I've admitted that I lied to the IRS, who can put me in jail, but I'd never lie to you."
Yeah. I believe you. No, I don't. I don't believe you, to say the least.
It's one of a half dozen of my own personal stories I could tell you about those sorts of situations.
This is the Wild West, and there's no question. There's no question about that. But that creates opportunity too, from buyer's perspective as well, right? This isn't easy. When we talk about trying to buy and purchase these businesses, if you think it's easy, just listen to the story Mike just told you for the last minute. It's not easy to do this. I'll say generically, but what's the best advice that you can give to buyers? Is it really doing the reps? That's probably starting point one, but what else?
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge part of it, but it's doing the reps after you've made certain decisions. It's really funny. I'll hear buyers who will say, "I'm open to anything." And their belief is that openness creates more opportunity, when in reality, it does the exact opposite, right? It's the buyers who say, I'm looking to buy a convenience store within 30 miles of my home that meets this financial criteria. Okay, and you say, "Well, I've just dramatically lowered my available opportunities." You have, but now you can go out and identify the 50 or 100 potential targets that do fit your criteria. And you can look at 25 sets of financials of almost identical businesses and start to learn from the nuances. Oh, this one makes most of their money this way, while this one makes most of their money, right? And so it's that focus in a particular area. It's the difference between speed and velocity, right? The difference is speed, boy, I'm going super fast in no sense of direction. Velocity, I'm moving slower, but I'm moving slower towards a very specific goal.
It's something that, as we as investment advisors explore how to participate in this space in the right way for ourselves and clients, it's one of the criticisms that we make of search funds. So really bright, if folks that aren't familiar with the search fund model, it's usually some very bright younger person that's coming out of graduate school, usually a prestigious university. And they have this really good support system to go and buy a business. That's what they want, is their first job is to buy this business, which is great. But the problem for us always lies with, like, well, what's your buy box? And they go industry 1, 2, and 3. It's like, okay, industries 1, 2, and 3 are not the same industry. They're vastly different. What is it that you know about any of these industries? Like, where does your expertise lie? And I see some similarities in your answer there. It's like, shrink that buy box. It's like, if you don't think it's specific enough, do it again. If you think you got it, and you know what, give it another run and make it even more specific. Because you're right, then I can look at these similar businesses all next to each other, and really start to dig into. So there's too much nuance here for you to spread yourself that thin. I think it's just not possible.
Well, not only that, Brandon, you've got to combat messaging that is in this ecosystem that tells you to do the exact opposite.
Please.
I got those posts,
gurus, go.
right? I got those posts that come in that say, you should buy a business in an industry you don't understand because your creativity will transform the business and the industry. And like, this has got to be a bad dream, but the truth is that's one of 1,000 stupid messages that are out there in this space that for those prospective buyers that don't know any better, it's easy to get sucked in. It's easy to believe the I call it M&A porn that's out there. And let's take another example. Shall we talk about passive income in small business ownership?
Let's talk about in real estate too at the same time, right?
Yeah. Okay. It's a great concept until you get that 2 a.m. phone call, right? Yeah. Hey, heat's out, or there's a leak, or Jim's not coming in today, and your window washing business has scheduled for the largest client you have to service that day. Well, guess what you're doing that day as your passive ownership? Now, if you don't mind cleaning windows, that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
I should start here, Brandon. I am a huge fan of small business ownership. Again, I've done it most of my career. It's been incredibly lucrative for me. I've made good money. I enjoy the life it's built for me. I'm a huge advocate, but I desperately want prospective buyers to go into this with their eyes wide open, not convinced by some. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of guru messaging in this space?
Same stuff. It's the same guru messaging I see across. We have the luxury to look across asset classes. So I see it across asset classes all the way, where the end result is them selling you a course. And so I always look at people's economic incentives, right? So their incentive is to sell you a course to buy businesses. What do you think they're going to tell you about buying businesses? It's easy. It's great. You're going to get rich.
Yep.
Same thing for real estate. They're going to tell you the same thing, right?
Can't lose, Brandon.
Can't lose. It's going to be great. It'll be amazing. It's not. And we know it's not. I mean, we can make these assets passive, and that's what we try to do at our shop. But believe you me, someone's doing the work. It's just, it's not going to be you. We need to make them passive. We can't just purchase them and expect them to be that way.
And you're always trading margin for lifestyle when you do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If we're going to pay somebody else, we should expect lower returns. Right. We preach that all the time for people who are making the transition away from being active to passive, is you should expect lower economics. And they're like, well, why? Like, well, when you were doing the work, don't you expect to make more money? Yeah. Doing the work than not doing the work? And so, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that passivity falls into that question about what is the small business marketplace. And the most recent numbers show that 98% of small businesses have less than 20 full-time employees.
Wow.
So we've got 2% truths in this space, and we've got 98% truths. Because what's the problem with 20 or less employees? You're only a phone call away from being sucked back into that business. And again, that's not the end of the world. Yeah. But if you've bought passive income and you need it to work that way, and you get the phone call from the key employee who says, Mike's flashing back, I've fallen in love and I'm moving to Alaska. Oh. I can't compete with that as an employer. There's nothing I can offer that's going to change that person's mind. So now I'm sucked back in for the 3 to 6 months it takes me to hire and train the. Yeah. Is there passive income opportunity out there? There is. It's upmarket. It's in the 2% space, or it's incrementally available as you go down market, but you'd better be ready for passive to turn into very, very active.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. And yeah, we're definitely not bashing those folks and I think it's a great idea for someone who wants to dig into that business and be active in it, yeah, explore the space. Give it a go. It sounds like a good place for buyers to start is to have a little, we refer to these as come to Jesus moments, and kind of figure out what is it that you're looking to achieve here? What is it that you're capable of? What is it that you're willing to do? Do you have that? Is that a start conversation, especially with the buyer who's like, hey, Mike, I'm open to everything. Is that a good start point for them?
Absolutely. I mean, it obviously depends on the circumstances of resources that they're bringing to the table. What we forget from the outside, and I say we forget because I have forgotten this several times. Small business ownership is a lifestyle decision. It becomes a significant part of who you are. Can you change that over time? Can you extract yourself from a business? 100%. In fact, you have to if you subsequently want to make that business sellable. But if there's a buyer going into a business that thinks they're going to do that without this business becoming a large part of their lifestyle and just the time that they spend and who they are and what they do, they better have more zeros on the end of their numbers than most buyers do.
Gotcha. That's well put. Let me flip you back to the sellers for a second.
Yeah.
Let's imagine for a second that someone bought a business and they did it absolutely right. Everything that they could possibly do to make that business ready to sell. What's that look like?
I want to make sure I understand. You're saying the seller, they've asked me that question again, Rob.
Yeah, I have a better way to ask it. That's more efficient. Okay. That just popped into my head. Should have started here. Should a buyer of a business start building and planning for that business to sell immediately when they buy it?
It's great advice that I've always found difficult to follow. Here's what I tell startups, startup owners or buyers is our first challenge is to get to sustainability. Then we get to sellability, right? Given this, it's just, I love the advice, but if you're not sure how you're going to make payroll, that's got to be your primary concern, right? If I'm working with a buyer right now who's close to pulling the trigger on buying a business, but the business is a bit of a turnaround, right? He's bringing experience to that business that should allow him to relatively easy 2x, 3x, 5x that business over the next 2 to 4 years. Okay, fabulous. I mean, that's a really exciting opportunity. But thinking about sellability in that circumstance, let's lock in financial stability first. So I 100% believe your advice, but that start with the end in mind isn't reflective of my experience of ownership. It's, okay, place isn't on fire anymore. Now I'm going to try to figure out where we're going. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, 1,000%. And the follow-up is one a path to the other, right? So as I'm thinking about, sort of in the back of my mind, when I think about making a business sellable, I think about operational efficiency and sustainability. That's just good for your business. And so then Absolutely. is that sustainability in that leveling off, maybe in that case of the turnaround, right? Like I make the changes and adjustments, I can meet payroll, we're growing. The things that I'm doing to do that is the same kind of solid business practices that I would do to make the business sellable. Are they just one and the same?
Sellability is ownability. They are the same things, right? And it's funny. I'll be talking to an owner, and he's like, "Hey, it sounds really cool. I'll give you a call in 5 years when I'm ready to sell the business." And it's like, what we're talking about building a team. We're talking about building systems. We're talking about increasing the profitability. We're talking about making the business easier to manage because we're collecting the data and have good records. Which part of that do you not want as an owner? right? Which part of that and then that's exactly what you were saying, right? Ownability is sellability. What we want is a business that we can own forever or sell tomorrow.
Mhm.
And the problem is that most owners believe they already have the second part locked in.
Oh,
Most owners believe that all they have to do is say the magic words, I want to sell my business, and then they're able to sell it. But you talk to a business broker in that 98% market,
yeah.
and they'll tell you that they reject 70, 80, 90% of small business owners that come to them looking to list their business for sale.
Interesting.
Yep. They will reject most owners because they don't want to waste the time on a business they can't sell.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, now there's two questions here. One, what are those markers for the broker typically that they're looking for in that business to sell? Probably similar to what we talked about before of what makes it attractive. But what's that feel like for the seller when they get, I mean, that's a harsh reality. That's like a 2x4 in the forehead. What's the reaction from potential sellers when that piece of wood comes flying at them?
I sat in shock at my desk for a half hour after hanging up the phone with the third broker who told me I couldn't sell my first business.
Mm.
I couldn't conceive that I had gotten it so wrong. And what had I done? I had read an article 2 years earlier that said businesses in your industry should sell for about 1 to 2 times revenue.
Mm.
And so what did I do? I chased revenue.
Oh,
Okay, you say, what an idiot. Fair. But for me, I then get to that place where I learn, oh, revenue has nothing to do with my ability to sell this business if I'm not actually creating any positive cash flow from that, right? Not enough cash flow, too owner dependent. I got all these reasons from the broker. I had reached out to the broker because I was at the low point I'd ever been professionally. I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to be done. And the broker says, sorry, buddy, can't help you. Fix these things. Call me back in 3 years.
wow. Not 3 months.
Not 3 months.
3
Because
years.
what happened? I mean,
Yeah.
you're a finance guy.
Yeah.
When I go to the bank to get a loan,
Yep.
how many years of financials do they want?
Yeah, I want to see solid 3 years of records, right?
If those records don't show profitability, so if I'm that owner, I got to start making a profitable business. I got to do it for 3 years. Now a buyer actually has a business that they're able to buy.
Where do you think, for most sellers, where do you think the mindset comes from that when I snap my fingers, I'm ready to sell? Like, where does that start, right? Because I see it as like, and I can see myself falling into this trap too, but I see it as very like myopic and like inner focused and like not thinking about, it's a two-party transaction here, right? Like not even bothering to think about that buyer. Where do you think that mindset comes from sellers? Because you see it all the time.
A couple different places. And I'll start by giving us as small business owners a little grace. When you have 1,000 things to do, each of them with an advocate pounding on your door, you're probably not going to put this topic at the top of your list, right? Because there is no advocate for a successful exit other than the owner. Freaking printer breaks down and there's an employee advocate for getting that fixed. But you having a successful future, not so much. You add to that the fact that as a small business owner, you're probably getting a half dozen calls a year from business brokers who are saying, Brandon, I've got a buyer for your business. Are you ready to sell?
Oh.
I'm not ready to sell. Hang up the phone. Hey, I can sell anytime I want to. Combine that with the content that comes screaming through our feeds about selling your business, doing this, doing that. There's a lot in the ether out there that I think contributes to the misperceptions that owners have about sellability.
Oh.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter the cause because the consequence is always borne by the owner. So you got to own this topic, and you got to own it 3 to 5 years before you care about it. That's the hard part. You got to care about this before you care about it. You got to
Yeah.
get your business ready for sale before you're ready to sell it.
That's interesting. God, that is perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. I get it. I see it now, right? There's not, it's a lot easier for me to worry about making payroll tomorrow because that's screaming in my face, right? It's
That's right.
fire in a building. This building's on fire, but the sell business building's on fire, but it's like it's smoldering in the woods somewhere, right? Like, worry about that later, right? That's not a big deal. We'll get to it, right? And I'm getting all this.
Optimists.
Yeah.
Optimists, Brandon.
Yeah.
We have built the business
Yeah.
figuring things out when they showed up on our desk. We've built our business by doing the best we can with the information that's provided. And again, it always comes back to me for simple pragmatics. What I tell small business owners, what I suggest they do, is to take a single lunch hour per month, put it in their calendar, and essentially set a monthly date with their future self, where they take a half an hour during lunch and they listen to a podcast on this topic, or they read an article, or they go out to lunch with a business broker. They do something that feeds this topic. And cumulatively over time, they will see a phenomenal ROI from that time spent. We're talking about half an hour a month to just start to care a little bit about this topic. Figure out what you need to unlearn about it. And here's the flip side of it. Again, going back to your buyers. Everyone who's ever looked and explored buying a business knows how incredibly painful it is as a buyer to try to educate a seller.
Yeah.
Oh, Brandon, you want $1 million for your business. Here's why I can't possibly afford to pay that. That is, educating a seller is a miserable experience and almost never successful.
Yeah.
Now, if you're the fifth buyer that seller's talked to, maybe, right? Maybe they've already gotten this messaging and education from others. So but it goes back to the question I wrote down in my notebook on an airplane when I was thinking about doing this Exit Oasis space, and that's, how do you sell medicine to people who don't know they're sick?
Yeah.
How do you convince small business owners to pay attention to this topic when they don't understand that not doing so results in there being no gold at the end of the rainbow?
Yeah. It has analogies to making sure you get your physical fitness in every day and eating right too, right? Like there's definitely
100%.
overtones here too, right? Where
100%.
that donut tastes good this morning though, Mike. It was delicious. I gotta tell you, but I'm gonna pay for it, 20, 30 years from now.
I'm starting my workout plan on January 1st, right?
Me too. Every January 1st.
That's right.
It's an annual thing. I do think there's opportunity here though, like we had discussed, of making your business more efficient, more profitable today. Right? Do you try to really emphasize that with current business owners? Like, yeah, we can talk about the sale. I know you're not interested, but you know what? If you work out today, you're actually going to feel better and function better today. Like, is there something there that becomes a bit more attractive when they sort of look at it from that context?
Oh, yeah. It is the blessing and curse of small business ownership, is that how things go are both your fault and your ability to fix. You are the cause of and solution to any problem. So, Brandon, you want to make more money? That's a series of decisions that you need to make about your business.
Yeah.
You want to grow the business? That's a series of decisions. Now, can we change the macro? No. But if I start it's really interesting. I think about the number of business owners that I have had to convince to pay themselves more money. And they will tell me, you know what? I'm not money motivated. And I'm like, fabulous. Then take all the money you pay yourself, write a great big check to charity.
Yeah.
and send it off. Because what we're talking about right now is the snow. I had to warm up the snowblower for the season.
Oh, yeah.
And the snowblower's got a choke on it, right?
Yep.
And we all know that sound, right? Where it's just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And then you adjust the choke and suddenly things purring.
Yep.
That's what a small business needs to be. That's what the owner needs to create. It's good for the owner. It's good for a buyer. It's good for employees. It's good for the customers. That's a win across the board. And but again, we get conditioned as owners. Oh, my clients don't want to pay more. I've got this problem or that problem. And it's like, that engine's not running the way it should. If you're miserable as a small business owner, why would someone pay you for the opportunity to do your job?
And there it is. I have two more questions for you.
Hit me.
Sort of. One, you mentioned before distressed. So some may be distressed. What do you see in some of those opportunities? Because theoretically, I sort of look at this and say, maybe there are some businesses out there that aren't ready to be sold, but we know the things that you would do to make them ready to sell. What if you bought those and then implemented those things inside of those businesses?
Love it. It's a fabulous opportunity. As long as, and I've gone through these search processes, and it's what I tell others that are considering a turnaround, is what you're looking for is a business that's broken in a way that you know how to fix.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a great product or service, but the previous owner or the current owner is an operations guy, and you have marketing and sales chops. There's an example of where you can take a pre-existing and blow it up, but you had better know. We see this a lot in the online space, almost too much, where somebody will buy a website because they're really good at Facebook ads, and they'll apply Facebook ads to that website, and they'll see a 2x, 3x, and then they'll turn around and sell that business. But they're taking a specific skill, finding the hole, and for your prospective buyers that are out there in your audience, that requires a level of self-awareness about what you are genuinely good at as an owner operator, because no one's good at everything. And so what experience do you have that you can, the example I was talking about earlier is a gentleman that has 20 years of experience in the food production industry, and he's looking to buy a business in that industry. I mean, he's got it locked down in terms of what he can bring in value to that business.
That's really, that's interesting. All right. So it is a real, I'm going to keep playing that thesis out personally and for our investors and see what we can figure out there. That's really interesting. We didn't spend enough time talking about the businesses you still own, what you owned before. To walk us through that history. What have you kept? What do you still run?
I have a small holding company, and I've got the Exit Oasis process, or the Exit Oasis business. Previous businesses that I owned were primarily service oriented. That first one I mentioned, we did back office and staffing for nonprofits, associations, and schools. So everything from executive director to receptionist level services. That was a very person intense, process intense undertaking for me. So once I sold that, I went the exact opposite direction and started building a portfolio of the laundromat, car wash, much more straightforward, simpler operations that allowed me to sleep a little easier at night.
There you go. Semi-passive. Can I say that? We know it's
maybe it depends on how you define semi-passive, because they were really passive until they weren't, right? It's literally 9 o'clock on a Friday night, and the low temperature alarm goes off on my phone at the facility. That means, and by the way, it's the middle of winter. So that means I can ignore that and go the next morning and find that everything water related in that car wash is frozen solid. Or I can hop in the car at 9, drive the 45 minutes to the location, right? So that's, now again, I had a guy, but he hadn't picked up the page. So what do? Well, you don't go passive in an environment like that.
No, next man up. That's you.
That's right. Yeah.
Do it.
And that's what we talked about earlier, right? The larger the business, the more potential buffers you have to that. Mm-hmm. So again, it depends on what kind of dollars you have to invest and what you want, what you're willing to trade off in terms of lifestyle and margin.
That's awesome. I think we could talk for 3 more hours at least. This has been awesome. What's the best place for folks to find you, to connect with you? Who do you want to come have a conversation with you?
Exitoasis.com is my website. As you alluded to earlier, I'm most active on LinkedIn. If you go there and search Mike Finger, believe it or not, you'll find more than one. But
they're imposters. The imposters.
It won't be difficult to find me in that. Who do I want to? I am a junkie for conversation with small business owners. So it's why I do what I do. I genuinely enjoy the conversations I get to have and the engagement that this space creates for me. So find me on LinkedIn. Let's start a conversation.
That's awesome. Mike, thank you so much for coming on. We'll link some of that stuff up in show notes so people can find you. That way, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Brendan, my pleasure.
And everyone listening, thank you, and we'll see you next time.